And it's only three little
Okay.
questions.
I'm rolling.
Okay. So obviously, I know your history on dealing with racial profile, and obviously this year's been harsh. We've had Eric Gardner, so many people who have been shot and killed, and I just want to know what currently you've done. You could talk a little bit about what you've done in the past and where we're at now. I understand you've had a meeting recently regarding racial profiling and
Well, we've
stop
had
this.
we've I've done a lot of work around police reform and actually gun violence. I mean, we've done a lot of work on gun violence. Doesn't make as much news as the police work, but a lot of them are intertwined. Many places where you see over policing, you'll see high incidence of gun violence, but you'll also see high instances of poverty. You'll also see the ability to attain proper education is low. Housing is bad. You'll see people under and unemployed. So there's a lot of issues that work together, I feel, and I've been really trying to steer the conversation, not just for police reform, which we absolutely need, but those other things I mentioned are killing our communities. They're just doing it a lot slower. And so we need the same kind of fire to go after the people in charge of housing, the people in charge of our youth organizations and funding them properly. And so that's what I've been really trying to push, to deal with the structural deficits that are occurring in these communities, as well as the police reform. We just passed a bill that I sponsored, which is called the Fair Chance Act, commonly called Ban the Box. You can no longer ask a question about criminal history until you've offered a conditional offer of employment. And we think that would be fantastic because it's another structural issue that are preventing people from getting jobs. So I always try to connect those things. But with the stop, question, and frisk, it's something that police actually need to do. What we were trying to get at was the unconstitutional manner in which they were doing it. And I think we really did do that. Stops have fallen dramatically. There's no magic number. You just do a stop if you think someone's committed a crime or they're about to commit a crime. And the new data that's going to come out will actually show that shootings have taken a dip. There's never been really a correlation between the stops and the shootings, although shootings are still something that is epidemic in the country and we have to address in the way that we haven't. But the profiling issue, I just always want to expand it because absolutely in the police that does happen, not just in New York City but across the nation. But that same kind of problem when it comes to race and class is in so many of the other areas that we're not focused on, that I feel like if we focus on those, we'll go a long way to deal with some of the issues with the police. The police are often sent in to do the job of many agencies, and that's actually not fair to them. It's obviously not fair to the community.
So I know, like I said, you've been getting laws passed about stop and frisk, and I know you've done work. How have you done work so that the relationships, I guess, between the police and the community is like strengthened? Because I come from the background back in the day when you knew your cop. There was a beat officer, and so have you done anything in terms of specifically to try to encourage that?
Well, I always do, and I think the work that we do is actually for, they call it police reform, and I think it's actually for better policing. So all this has to do with better policing. We've been promoting community policing models. I think I'm happy that New York City has adopted some of that. They call it neighborhood policing. We're waiting to see how it's going to turn out. So there are a lot of things that are happening that I'm happy about. You still have to see how it turns out at the end. But I think at least with this new administration, this new mayor, the police commissioner, they're at least saying the things that we wanted to hear many years ago. And I think they're attempting, whether it's new training, whether it's a neighborhood policing model, we're still attempting to do that. I just came from National Night Out a couple of days ago. That is a national time when police come out to specifically mingle with the community. We're always promoting police community relations. Some of the funding that we put in from the city council actually is to hire some officers that are going to be doing the neighborhood policing. So it's sort of like the old beat cop, but with enhanced capabilities to do things. So some of those police officers will be back. The beat cop was removed for funding reasons quite so many years ago. So we're always doing those things to try to promote that. I am always trying to push the police as our community partners, and we should view them as that. My only issue has been they can't be the only partners that are responsible for public safety. some of these other things have to be involved as well, or else the onus is just too great, and we're setting ourselves up for many issues and problems.
Okay, when you said some of the other things, can you name like
some of the issues that I mentioned, like poverty, like housing, the Department of Education should be involved, the Division of Youth Community Development, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. They all have to be involved in this public safety discussion, because if you leave it just to the police, it's going to cause problems. They have a specific job to do, which is law enforcement, and we should help them do that. At the same time, some of the things that they're doing with the police now, how they're trying to, I hope, shift them to be problem solvers and not just immediately going to an arrest, I think will also help with community relations, because when people think of police, you want them to think of people who are there to help us. And I think a lot of people do think that. There's a significant portion that doesn't, and we want to make sure that we try to correct that.
Okay. And the last question is, because I know you've said this a million times, but can you just talk a little bit, because part of the film is going to be people talking about, you know, when they were racially profiled. So obviously the major one at the West Indian Day Parade, that kind of sparked you to get really into being aggressive about, you know, changing things. Can you just say it, you know, talk a little bit about that experience?
I've been black for quite some time, so I've had many experiences with law enforcement, with NYPD in particular. I've had a lot of negative ones, but I often try to just remember, though, for every one negative I've had, I've actually had 3 or 4 that were positive, and so I try to balance it out. Unfortunately, the negative ones usually are really negative, and I believe if I looked different, they wouldn't have occurred. And when it came to West Indian Day Parade, that was another case. I was walking along with a friend of mine who's also black, who actually worked for Bill de Blasio when he was public advocate. This was when he was public advocate. His name is Kirsten Foy. But we were going to an event that we were invited to, going back to the Brooklyn Museum. We went through a couple of the checkpoints, and then we came to one where people didn't want to let us through. And so I showed my credentials. I have a city council badge. I had my council pin on. Had a big ribbon that said guest. And I actually, at the time when it was going down, I called one of the police chiefs I knew. Next thing I knew, I was in handcuffs. Kirsten was on the floor. But they either didn't believe or didn't care that we were who we said we were. And so at that point, what was sad actually after it happened, I didn't really think it was going to be that big of a deal. I didn't think, because it happens so often. It's just another part of it. And it was sad that I actually thought like that. But we did say we were going to use it to try to highlight some of the other issues. And I believe then that what they were doing was stop, question, and frisk. Although it wasn't a stop, question, and frisk, that atmosphere that you could treat people differently based on how they look can create an atmosphere where people will believe that you can do that. And it can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. In our case, thankfully, it wasn't as serious as in many other cases where people have been killed.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up, were you really like surprised? I mean, it didn't matter whether who you were. I guess that shouldn't have been done in that manner. But were you know?
My thought when I think of these things, what I just generally think of is if there was the same set of circumstances, and the only thing I changed was my hue, would it have been different? And that's the kind of lens I always look at things. And in that case, I think yes. I think if we look different, I don't necessarily look like a council member. Not just my hue, my earrings, my locks. I smell of Brooklyn all over, which I'm very proud of. But I think if I looked different, it may not have happened. And if we looked different, it may not have happened. I'm pretty sure it would not have, particularly to that degree. I mean, as I mentioned, all my credentials, and I had a police chief on the phone that they could have simply spoken to, and just chose not to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we're going to do the Mandela thing. We're going to have you at the desk.
Oh, okay.
So, now, is there anything you'd like to add? Something that we didn't
I think I'm good.
ask you? Did you
I think we're cool.
Go Real Sisters.